I've never seen a diamond in the flesh. I cut my teeth on wedding rings.
Dude, that's pretty cool.
Man, that is
On this
that
sad
is a
clown.
sad clown.
Proud of my address.
Dude, that's pretty good.
This is The Gloom, bringing you weekly interviews with F3 Omaha Packs, exploring their F3 experiences and finding those sticky elements that create the glue in the gloom.
We're excited because we're getting back into kind of this transition of leadership season within F3 Omaha. A lot of shovel passes, a lot of changes in leadership, and that means for us on the Gloom a lot of great men that we get to interview. And so the guy we've got today, man, I remember this guy giving a COT one time that really hit home because he was talking about being sleep deprived, but then he's also shared about mentoring his nephew in kind of a space that I hadn't heard of before, and has been a great leader at the Trident, bringing us some new flavors of Namerama videos. And so anyway, Slick, man, you look good as always. The hair is looking good, and we were just happy to have you. I wonder, just start us off with like the first that first experience or workout, like who EH'd you, what was the first workout like, and then how did we name you Slick? It's probably the beautiful hair, but I don't know.
Yeah, I guess just to start off too, appreciate the space from you guys. I'm excited to go on this journey with you as my guides today. I think that I'll call it a fear portal that you guys offer for the Omaha Packs of, we don't get to talk about, we're everyday guys that don't get to talk about ourselves. So there's a healthy amount of anxiousness and fear and all the things that go with it for the interviewee. I'm sure there's flavors of that for you guys too. I know you're a bunch of episodes in now, but just want to thank you guys immensely for the space that you're giving the Omaha guys here. So 2019 November, I'd say it was kind of a synchronistic thing that happened. So I am brother-in-laws with Eric England, aka Pothole, and it was right around Thanksgiving time. I had been looking for, I was trying to sign up for a gym. So my wife and I moved to Omaha in 2018 from Chicago. She's from here. We met in Chicago, moved back here. But I had kind of, fallen out of the gym experience for a while. I was trying to find a functional gym that was affordable, that wasn't overly priced. And then all of a sudden, Pothole, it was either Thanksgiving or the week before Thanksgiving. And he had told me that his wife actually sent him the article that had been posted, I think it was the previous summer, in the Omaha World Herald about F3. And he just went out on his own, like the week before. No one EH'd him. Just went out and was telling me about it. And I was like, when's the next workout? This sounds great. This is perfect. The price is right up my alley. And the functional kind of outdoors aspect was what I was looking for. I didn't know what I was looking for, but ended up, being everything that it is. And so my first post was Oracle. I feel like that's such a gateway for so many guys. The 7 o'clock on a Saturday doesn't interfere with the work week. Any obligations that you have can kind of be parked, on an early morning Saturday. And it was No Dose on the queue, who, I didn't know any of you guys yet. And it ended up being, he did a 300 workout or a Spartan workout, which we spent the entire time on the football field running 100-yard sprints and I think we ended up doing like 30 or 35 100-yard sprints with, I think, exercises in between, maybe a walk down, sprint back type dynamic. But I was just telling this to Tater the other day. I was walking up to the group, and again, kind of that fear of the unknown, wasn't sure what to expect. what kind of group of guys this was. And Tater actually, before I even made it to the group that was circled around, he intercepted me with that big smile and welcomed me in, asked my name, was glad to have you, welcome to F3. And I'm like, I'm in. This is great. And I think even the fact that he did that at that time says a lot about who he's always been. But to kind of recognize a new guy before even coming into the group, I don't feel like that's often the experience for FNGs, right? And so there's an automatic comfort that came with doing that workout that day. I remember halfway through the workout, I actually tweaked my hammy because I was trying to go too hard to prove myself, which says something about me trying to stand out when I hadn't done 100-yard sprints since high school, college. Tweaked my hammy, ended up still, being fine, could rest it, and started coming out more often. But I was pretty religious, Oracle 7:00 on Saturdays for probably about a month or two. And that was right before, COVID happened too. So that was kind of my main squeeze for a while, and then started adding in other AOs beyond that. I think Paradise ended up being one where I really ventured out, went east because we're out west. But to get back to kind of that day, was in the group of guys, Name-a-Rama comes around. I get through the name, the age, and the FNG, no problem. That was good. But it was one of those namings that took an awkwardly long time to land on a name. Which if you've ever been a part of those, whether you're the FNG or you're the one that's part of the group naming or the queue for that day, it can get a little tense, right? Like you don't know what to expect. I think a lot of it plays off of the honesty from the FNG too, of what kind of name you get. A lot of my stuff I thought was pretty basic, from Chicago and these sports teams. I got a tattoo on my back, love pizza, and you had kind of all the different variations of what could come through. Obviously, there, no dose just wouldn't bite. He just kept going. And I think at one point it was November. I took off my hat because I was starting to feel uncomfortable, and he was like, "Oh, there we go, slick," because I was starting to grow my hair out right before we started having kids, and I was a clean cut, one on the sides and maybe a little bit longer on top sometimes, but I had just started growing out my hair that summer, and yeah, that's how we landed on slick.
I love it, man. I love it. And this is a perfect example of why we should video record these guys. Sometimes, we have this saying that Plague and I both have faces for radio. Like we could have done this live and I think the guys would have taken something from it. And I think slick just fits you great now with the hair and stuff like that. So that's great. I think you kind of hit on a good piece that not a lot of guys talk about in the first naming or getting the name for the FNG. It takes a lot to get something from guys, right? You're already kind of coming in and you're trying to be as vulnerable and open as possible. But I mean, if you're around 20 or 30 guys, I don't even know what I would tell a stranger what I like about myself or what I like to do or my hobbies. Yeah. So I love that you highlighted that because I think that can be lost on guys. I know when I'm naming guys, I just pick the first name that I hear that I think is kind of funny. And
yeah,
I try and avoid that, but I do know that it happens. And it's, you wound up with a name that I think just suits you perfect. And now your persona.
Yeah, totally. There was a time where I was like, I can't cut my hair now because what am I if I'm not long hair slick, right?
Right. So, you talked for a period of time about how, your early goings, you were a regular Oracle guy. And then you started adding in some more flavor here and there at different sites. What was it that kind of got you to make that jump? Okay, it's not just Oracle, I'm looking to hit stuff during the week. Was it a scheduling thing where some stuff freed up, or were you starting to buy more into what we were doing, or what was it?
Yeah, that's a good question. My progression was Oracle for a little bit, and then I kind of invited myself to second F cafeteria after. That was kind of like the next hurdle I felt like of, okay, I want to see what this is all about. And it was really there that it opened me up to thinking about, other AOs, other workouts during the week, what that looked like, becoming more comfortable with guys, having other guys talk about different AOs and, the type of experiences that are happening there. I was getting into running at that time too. And I think it was, Murph next and then Paradise after that. And it really ended up being kind of following the lead with some other folks that I was getting to know. And I had Gator and I talked about this recently, but we joke around like everybody has a wait time story, right? Like you kind of like have this moment where you're talking to the guy that created it, and it kind of all starts in the same place. Like I didn't know who he was. It was at a cafeteria after Oracle, and he told me about the Free to Lead book, which again I had no idea that this was even part of it. And I think really that was the catalyst. Like I think it was Oracle, cafeteria, Free to Lead, and then I was like, oh man, I am all in on this. Like this book was perfectly articulated for all of the emotions I was having for this point in my life. Everybody's different within that, but I was like, no one talks about this stuff. No one talks about the male relationships and kind of the default that we fall into with that. And so then I started kind of going out to, different flavors. And I think Paradise specifically was something that was interesting to me because I started going there, and then I started getting, more vulnerable with the Q source that was happening there. And that was something that, if I look back at the trajectory of my time with Omaha F3, it was that Q source that really deepened my relationship with a lot of the packs in a different way, right? Like you don't have those kind of vulnerable conversations even out at beatdowns all the time. But I think the Q source at Paradise, especially at that time, had a really good mix of redwoods, of guys that had a lot of wisdom to share. And I kind of just cherished that time before expansion too, where I was lucky enough to get close with some of those guys, Plague included. And so, yeah, that's kind of that progression for me.
Man, it is cool to just kind of reflect back on like some of those things or those moments. Life is like there's a lot of moments. I'm curious, maybe to back up a little bit further, but it feels like you just kind of who you are innately, right? You've maybe always been very reflective and like you're empathetic, and so as you're coming into this group, I see you kind of intentionally taking steps to get to join the group, right? You found this group, you noticed some things, and then you like stepped in. I don't know, is that something, is that maybe just like who you are, or are there some things that you like were you really kind of stepping out into kind of this zone of discomfort to make those relationships because you were newer in town, or like what was that like? Because I think a lot of guys, like, they see us going to coffee, but they're like, I gotta get into work and answer emails or whatever, but what was different for you, I guess?
Yeah, I think part of it has to do with being in a new town, not knowing anybody at all other than what free to lead would say, proximity relationships, work relationships, husbands of wives, friends. And I think really that the book was like what helped me get out of my comfort zone. I was like, okay, like if everybody's sharing kind of this mindset of being vulnerable and going out there, like I didn't have Pothole was kind of just religiously Saturdays at that time. So I was craving more, and it really just became putting myself out there. And I think Paradise was perfect for that because it kind of was the pre-run mindset of you can have more of a conversation during the beatdown when you're not, cadencing or moving from one thing to the other. So I think it kind of allowed me to start asking questions to guys more specifically outside of these secretive pre-runs beforehand that no one used to post about before. I was like, wait, there's guys coming in before the workout starts. Like, what's happening here? But yeah, so I think innately I am that way. I have to say though, like I'm not someone who is really good at creating relationships. Like it's always been a struggle for me. It's always been very hard for me, especially with men, to just develop friendships. I feel like, I get in my own way or I get in my own head about it. And so I think what F3 does just so great is it offers this like practice arena for you to kind of explore who you are and who you want to be with no judgment, right? Like you don't get spaces like that as a man in most environments. You're expected to perform, you're expected to live up to these archetypes that we are. And when I talk to any FNGs, I'm like, this is a judgment-free zone. Truly, you can say anything, you can talk about anything, you can ask any questions, and it's kind of like what's said here stays here.
Yeah, well said. And just to kind of rehash something you said, and to remind you and other FNGs to give yourself some grace, it is hard to, as like just men in general, to find time to create lasting relationships within the community, especially if you've got a family that you're taking care of, you've got a job. How much time would you even have in a given week to say, okay, I'm going to go out to, where am I going to go? Am I going to go to my church? Am I going to go to a bar? Who am I going to go and try and make friends with? And again, to your point, like F3 is a small period of time, but it does kind of accelerate and give you that opportunity to say, hey, judgment-free zone. And guess what? All these guys are kind of coming in with the same thoughts that I'm having, or at least some similarities, right? I mean, we've all got to have something in common to decide, hey, 5:30, we're all going to go work out at the same time. So I love that you said that. Curious about the timing of when you started and like building relationships. I mean, where were you at when the pandemic hit? Had you started already? Had you not? How did that affect kind of this acceleration or opportunity to kind of get connected? Maybe you can touch on that area.
Yeah. Man, it was as life goes, right? Like you're starting to get into this rhythm, this momentum. I had started losing weight. I at one point in my life, at least like 10 years ago, I was 60 pounds heavier than I am, and kind of found things that worked for me, but probably lost an additional like 20, 25 pounds within that first year of Omaha F3. But so 2019 going into 2020, we actually found out we were pregnant with our first kid that January. And so it became, and with the pandemic happening, you're like, all the uncertainty of safety within the gloom. A lot of guys were still going out, still posting, which everybody has their own comfort zone of what they did, their situation. For me, it was like full lockdown, come back home. But what I loved is the move to Slack that we kind of relied on for that connection at that time, and I leaned in quite heavily. I think there was someone posting beatdowns every day. We were kind of changing it around each day of someone posting a beatdown that people can go out. And I'd go out to where Fancy Feast is now, at the football field, and do the beatdown of the day, or do some variation of a beatdown, post my own name-orama just to feel that connection with the pack. So I had kind of gotten lightning in a bottle and I didn't want to let it go. And that Slack connection ended up being something that allowed that connection to continue to take place. And I think I started posting again, I think April or May within the pandemic during that time. So I think my VQ was June at Wild Kingdom, once I started posting again. So that was, pandemic version 1, and then we get back into the winter of the following year, version 2, with the Matrix, and a few of us guys, newborn son had just been born in September, and it was like, again, full lockdown mode. So I was posting with Barn Door and Sergeant Slaughter, and a couple of downrange packs from Kansas City and Iowa, 4 or 5 times a week. I made up a modified Murph that we did on Mondays, which actually worked pretty well. But gosh, that first, year and a half, that summer was great because I was posting all the time from what we knew of, safety with COVID. But I relied heavily on the virtual experience of Matrix and Slack up until that following spring.
Man, having kids during all this stuff too, right? So, so I can identify with you there, and I know Pony can, and a lot of guys. But I don't know. What are your thoughts? Because, like, to me, I'll be like building good male relationships, and then we'll have another kid, and then it's like it's the baby's fault that I can't maintain a good relationship with other
Yeah.
guys. But then, like, we know we're doing the right thing, right? We're good because we're focused on our M and our shorties, and what where I've always found comfort is like every time I get back together in the gloom with guys, and it doesn't really even matter who. It just we pick up where we left off. But then I don't know. So what's been your experience having kids? How has the group maybe helped, or what's been your as you've
Yeah.
been doing that?
Gosh, in so many ways, right? First thing that comes to mind is concentrica, right? I think there's enough of the packs that are so passionate about their M, their 2.0s, that it's easy. My resting rate is my concentrica, that middle ring. If my home life is not in harmony and balance, nothing is in balance. And so that's communication with my M. And we've gone through all the different cycles of pre-kids and pregnancy and post-kids of sleep for her is important. And whether it's my alarm going off or whether it's the late stages of pregnancy and not sleeping anyway, or newborn kid and sleep being at a premium, my priority has always been in connection with her. Like, how are you feeling? This is what I'm thinking for the week. This is what I want to do. We have a guest bedroom that sometimes I would go sleep in the guest bedroom so that, part of those things were kind of out of the way. The second thing that comes to mind is cycles, right? So I know that, the each PAX has a different life scenario that they're in. There's some with older kids, some with no kids, some with young kids. And I think it's being comfortable with where you're at with the phase of life that you're in, with the cycle that you're in. I know it's not always going to be what it is right now for the last 6 months with a newborn, right? But for the last 6 months, I only post on Tuesdays. And as much as that kills me to not be outside and seeing the guys and catching up with them and developing those relationships, there's a handful of guys that are always reaching out, being like, "Hey, you posted on Friday, you posted on Monday, miss seeing you out there." And at first it felt very like, I felt guilty. I felt like I had to be defensive about it. But I kind of moved into just being honest of like, hey, like, just can't make it work. Like, it's Tuesdays for me for a while and I'm comfortable with that, but I really appreciate you reaching out, and please continue to do that. Like, it's helpful for me to know that you're thinking about me. And I think that plays off of, me feeling like I want to be that for other people too, of checking in within that. And, obviously COVID was very unique within that, but again, it's a cycle now. Looking back at it, it's a moment in time that it almost doesn't seem real at this point of all the things that we kind of went through. But giving, you said it right, Pony, like giving yourself some grace in all the areas as a PAX, like not just as an FNG, but like don't make things that you are needing to do from a responsibility standpoint, or the things that you're feeling right are the right decisions for you, to prevent you from coming back out continuously. Like, whether you haven't posted in a month or 3 months or as much as you used to be, like, keep coming out. People want to see you. People want to talk to you. We'll always be receiving you with open arms, and there's no judgment again. So I think a lot of it is self-inflicted of, people kind of fall off because they're not a plague posting 4 or 5 times a week, or they're not a Blades posting 6, 7 times a week, or it's just everybody has a different story, and we have to give ourselves grace in leaning into that.
Man, I love that. With, you know, you're offering encouragement here. I want to offer encouragement to you. Completely agree. I mean, I think that as long as you're taking care of like your primary centering, right? Like what you say is like, this is the highest value to me, then everyone understands that. You know, I battled that, Plague battled that as well. You know, we both have wives that don't want us gone every single day. We have young kids. You know, I think Selleck was on early on and said, hey, I'm like close to a once a monther now. And and that's perfectly okay, right? Everyone's kind of got their own cycle that you're talking about. Um, and just knowing that it is kind of self-inflicted, that guilt that you're feeling, like sure you want to be out there, but as long as you're hitting your priorities, I think that's the most important thing. So just want to offer words of encouragement there. And I think what you said is perfect.
Hey, real quick, Pony, too. I just want to throw in, right? So we talk about high impact man, and we talk about acceleration, and I want to be clear that like the guy who's prioritizing his concentrica is still accelerating. He might be accelerating more than a guy who's prioritizing, fitness over family.
Right.
Yes.
And then a high impact man, right, is also like you're having a high impact on the relationships and closest proximity. So it's interesting because it's almost like we think a high impact man or someone who's accelerating is the one who posts the most or runs the most miles, or because we can measure those things. But truly, reinvigorated male community leadership looks like a man being what his family needs him to be, which we forget that, and because Slick's not posting a picture of him holding his newborn at 3 a.m. so that I can like it on Twitter. Doesn't mean he's not having a higher impact and maybe accelerating more than the guys that are out there. So it's this weird dynamic of like what you see and what you don't. And I've had to learn to get comfortable with like I don't need it to be measured, right? My most important things are the hardest to measure, and I'm getting more and more okay with that.
God, that's such a good idea. You know, what we should really start doing is posting your fart sack. Like, what's your fart sack? Like, what's your fart sack today? Like, is it a 3 a.m. holding of your kid selfie? Is it you laying in bed? Like, there's so many different variations of that, right?
Yeah, I love that. No,
That
and
might
that's
not be appropriate if it's a heart tag.
no, that's a great reminder, Plague. Just as a follow-up here, Slick, you had mentioned, if your family is right, if you're feeling like it's in balance, then everything's going well. But if it gets out of balance or out of tweak a little bit, that's when things start to shift or shake a little bit, get a little wobbly. Do you feel like that you personally do a good job of kind of taking some time to step back and assessing how things are going? Do you feel like you and your M have open lines of communication? Do you rely on something else like a shield lock or something that the group provides? I mean, or is it a combination of everything?
Yeah, good question. My wife and I are kind of cut from the same cloth, which serves us well. We're both very connected people, and I'd say we're learning how to communicate better even now, right? We've been together for almost 8 years now, and it's an evolution. And I'd say even more recently in the last few weeks, we're finding a different type of rhythm of communication, of deeper honesty, and being more vulnerable about how we're each feeling. Like, what are you feeling? Being more vulnerable and kind of asking some of the hard questions that we don't go into. And I'd say also, like, I'm trying to do that with some of the guys I'm closer with, whether it be F3 packs or just other male relationships that I have. It's like the ability to go deep is really reliant on your vulnerability within it. Like, you're not going to get the same response or depth from someone else unless you're kind of offering the space for someone to go there with you too. And so I like to go deep quick with people. It's hard for me to stay surface level, so I'll start asking the harder questions or the deeper questions, or like, what keeps you up at night, or what are you struggling through? And it's because I want people to do the same for me. Like, I yearn for being able to express the things that I need to unload off of myself. And I'm really fortunate that there's been a a few packs that have met me there, and I joke about this with Yodel actually because he approached me maybe about a year ago asking about Shield Lock, and I think that the Shield Lock is an incredible thing to be leaning into, and especially if you have the ability to do so. And we talked about leaning into the unofficial official Shield Lock that I feel like there are a few guys that are part of a Shield Lock that is together that I'm really close with, but I'm not part of that Shield Lock. And then there's kind of a couple other guys that I have gotten close with that we text often or check in on each other. But I just don't have the ability to commit to kind of the responsibility that comes with being a good Shield Lock member. And so, Yodel's in the same kind of life stage as me. So I think that there's some synchronicity there too, of just like understanding that the unofficial Shield Lock is just as good as, kind of the official one too. So don't feel like you're missing out or that you're not getting what you need from it. You can kind of design it for what you need out of it.
I love the Shield Locks are fascinating to me because I've changed my proximity, right, my physical location to the guys in my Shield Lock, which has impacted our ability to post. And so it's interesting, right? This idea of like the official, unofficial, or I think Rollbar in a episode a while back had just said there's kind of like the big S Shield Lock that is like all of F3 Omaha, F3 Nation even is in that Shield Lock, and then there's like the smaller group. And I think it's really cool though that you are self-aware enough to know where you're at, and that it's something you desire, but you maybe can't commit right now. And like you said about cycles, I think maybe, it doesn't mean it's off the table. I do want to kind of segue a little bit. And so if folks are not following you online, Slick, well, first they'll have to see you in the gloom and ask you what your real name is. But there is a blog out there, and as we kind of segue into faith, I want to read this, and I want to ask you if this is kind of related to faith. And I'm like, a longtime reader, first time meeting my celebrity here. But so you wrote this article, which is one of my favorites that you've written so far, but it's to my younger self. And so, you kind of talk about, well, I'll just read this. So this week I was gifted with facing some shadowy parts of myself that I thought I had already brought into the light. As is typically the case, the life classrooms we signed up for in this incarnation are persistently wanting to extend the boundaries of understanding. We cycle through them in bigger and bigger ways to obtain wisdom that's more expansive each time. And I love that goes on, and there's a lot about worthiness and really, really cool writing. And so my question is, is this related to faith for you? Because I also see this as like maybe even like some art form of just enjoying to write. But man, I love what you're putting out there. But talk to me about faith and maybe the blog, if it's two separate things, or but yeah, give me some thoughts.
There's a lot there. Yes, related to faith, and we'll call it big F faith, right? I myself came from a traditional Orthodox Christian upbringing, which, has served me so well. Kind of taught me sacredness, taught me about just kind of divine connection. But really over the past, 7-8 years for myself, I've been on this kind of journey of wanting to understand my faith deeper, because being in that kind of organized Christian religion, I still felt a yearning within it that there was more there that I wanted to know more about. And a lot of this kind of reflection and insight has been more recent, of finally coming into an understanding of kind of releasing attachment of things having to be this way or one way, because that's just not the way the world works, right? We are constantly given perspective that is completely different than ours. Whether that be religion, whether that be an upbringing, whether that be a family dynamic or experience with work. And so it all kind of translates for me of we yearn to be seen, we yearn for connection. Um, and it's really a coming home back into ourselves of not looking outside of ourselves for what God is, because a lot of the things that we hear and see and practice is a hierarchical way of thinking about religion, where there is a God who will save me, and I am not worthy to receive you, but you give down your blessing. And I want to challenge folks to maybe think a little bit differently about that, because what all the religions say is all the same song, really, is you are worthy. You are all, a variation of what God is, just a different way of experiencing it. And then that power of being able to be worthy rests inside of you. And I think that feeling, that thought is something that brings me peace, brings me a lot of excitement as well, because it feels like I've pulled all of this energy outside of me back into my body of, oh, I can operate from this place of knowing. I can operate from this place of connection. And the deeper I go, the closer I get to that divine experience. The more connections I create, the closer I get to this divine experience. And it's kind of that concept where, yeah, I grew up a certain way in a certain family with certain things and certain people around me. And that's my life classroom, right? And that's very different than Pony's classroom, or very different than Plague's classroom. But that doesn't mean that classroom's any better or worse. It's just different. And honoring those classrooms that each of us are going through, I think, is really what religion is trying to, the pieces that it's trying to connect, that I want to offer a different perspective on.
Well, I think that's awesome. It does, I do have a question for you, and it has to do with parenting or shorties or 2.0s. My wife and I just celebrated a year of keeping a kid alive. Now the joke is, okay, he made it a year. Now it's time to actually parent. He's getting to the age where he's starting to understand the things we're saying. Are we, resolving conflict appropriately? Are we introducing the right things? So my follow-up to you would be, how are you currently doing that with your kids? With what you just talked about in your aspect of faith and how you view that. How are you kind of shepherding or showing, your children your views, or exposing them to those things?
Yeah. I want to offer a reframing of parenting even. The collective consciousness of, again, hierarchy of how we lead our family or lead our kids, I think, is going through an evolution now too. And I want to offer, let's look at children as little humans who don't know how to use their bodies yet, who don't know how to operate this system, this biosuit that we're wearing. And so we try to approach our relationship with our children as a relationship with any of the packs, right? Like, I see them as an adult within a small human's body that doesn't know how to deal with all of these emotions, and doesn't know how boundaries work, and doesn't know how the world works. And so when I shift into connecting on that level, it changes my relationship with them. That's not top down. It's really seeing at their level and being connected at their level and what they're going through. And so the practice of faith to me becomes kind of an everyday experience, right? Like, them being seen by me, me honoring the feelings and emotions that are happening for them, and helping shepherd or guide them through those in a way that I would want my father to guide me. when I think about my relationship with my M, or I think about relationship with close friends now, I almost view them as like, what would I do for Remy, my son? Like, how would I treat him in this moment? Like, I can bring tenderness to it, or I could bring, past experiences of how, generational learnings of what was given to me that maybe isn't really what I needed, or what I'm still trying to unpack myself, that's caused so much friction in my life. And so, the long answer is, I don't know what that looks like in 5 years and 10 years, but I think by offering them a view of the world that's more connected, that's not hierarchical, I'm excited to see kind of what that brings from a spiritual community, and kind of bringing in more, vibration from that mindset.
I think, in just going back off where you started, is kind of eliminating the it should be this way or that way, and just like, allowing for these different perspectives. Something you said too, that I was just thinking through, is some of the framework that you've outlined. I don't think it doesn't require or sort of negate you from applying it if you do have some sort of specific religious affiliation, right? Like, I think, just as as a man who's a Christian, some of the practices you're outlining, I feel like I can benefit from and still maintain my belief system, and some of that structure too, is just being maybe more mindful of the world around me. Because when I hear you talk about your faith, I get a sense of peace that I know is accessible through what I believe to be my higher power, but I refuse to surrender control most days. So then I don't access it, right? So it's like, I don't know. But man, I just I love that you shared that. I do want to just commend you. I think we're tempted to fit in and then not share when we maybe find something that we do or believe or think differently. And I think some of what I think just Midwest, maybe in general, or maybe just our packs, right? There's a tendency, like, there's a lot of guys that would identify as Christians, and so I appreciate you sharing just where you're at, and even if it's maybe not not what everybody else is doing. I think sometimes we do what everybody else is doing because nobody showed us a different way. So I really appreciate that, man. I am curious, as you think about kind of the fitness, fellowship, and faith, and then being a site Q. I mean, obviously, I want to get your thoughts on leadership. I also really want to know how you came up with the selfie name-orama. I think that's a really cool thing that promoted guys feeling included in that, like whether you were leading or just participant there, and then kind of how maybe some lessons from maybe the leadership experience that translated to life, or maybe some things from life that kind of vice versa. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that space.
Yeah. I will say, how's the saying go? Genius is born from necessity. Is that the saying, right? Like, selfie name-orama. It was my first week after the shovel flag passed. I was queuing, and I go to do selfie name-orama, and I had my phone that was on top of my car when I drove away the week before, with a shattered video camera on the back that I go to record, and I go, oh man, I literally can't use the camera. Yeah, necessity is the mother of invention. And so I had to use the selfie camera because that was the only camera I had. So I went around the circle with the selfie, and that's actually not what made it stick. So I did that, and the next week, Gator queued, and he's like, "Oh no, I'm doing the selfie name-orama because that's what you did last week." And I was like, "Oh, nice, man." And it was really because of him that the selfie name-orama was born. So hat tip to Gator and leaning in there. So that's kind of a fun aspect of Trident that wasn't there before me with Roadhouse, and we even told Kilbasa too, we're like, hey, you don't that's not something that you need to carry forward too. Like, it's your site now, you do what you want. So, grew up playing baseball, football, being on teams with great leaders, and have always been kind of looked up to people who could lead well. I've managed people over time in my career as well, but I think that my leadership style has transitioned quite a bit in the last even like 2 years as well. Of, we talk about servant leadership as being kind of a great model to lean into. But to me, what servant leadership really actually means is just meeting people where they are. And if you're not a leader, or you're looking to be a leader, or you're not sure if you're a leader, if the way you connect with other people in your life is meeting and not judging people with where they're operating from, I think that that's kind of just the secret sauce into people feeling comfortable to be themselves, whether it's around you or at a place like Trident. So maybe that's a different way of thinking about that servant leadership. Like, let's just meet each other where we're at and try to relinquish that judgment.
Would you say so? Sorry, and we could probably talk for hours on this, but curious your thoughts, because I totally agree. Where I have found myself challenged with that approach is then the moment I need to give somebody feedback or like give them some direction. But I heard you say earlier, I was kind of paying attention to your words, and I heard you say I would like to offer. So kind of this approach of when you do give feedback or a suggestion, I don't know, is it using sort of select words to make sure that it's, I don't know, how do you give feedback with that model?
Everybody wants a choice, right? Like, at the end of the day, people don't want to be told what to do. And like, people aren't going to operate from authenticity when they're not choosing it for themselves either, which, when you think about corporate world or being a manager in corporate environments, that gets really tough because you have metrics and you have performance and you have things to do within that. But maybe it doesn't still need to be that way. It's still a choice. It's still an offering of, hey, I'm seeing this. I think that you could potentially lean in these ways. And maybe it's just and this is new for myself too, because I've stepped back from being in a manager role since moving into my new career. And I think part of it was because I wasn't happy with how I was managing. I wasn't feeling like I was really optimizing or breaking through, or feeling like I was connected in the way that I wanted to be. And I think, I was even thinking today before, coming on here, if this topic came up, of maybe this is offering a new, different type of cycle of leadership for me, as, leading people in certain ways, of testing out the, meeting people where they are and seeing how that goes.
I love that. Well, I'll be paying attention to the blog. I'm hoping that when you solve that one, I want to be the first to read it. No, I love it. I do think, I mean, it kind of goes back to what you said earlier of like, if we're allowing life to happen without our control, then maybe we are more flexible with trying new approaches, right? And not sort of expecting a certain outcome, right? Because we're just trying, we're maybe more flexible that way. I'll have to try that. I've not historically been the most flexible minded person. Curious then, because I think what I'm always hoping to hear a guy say is like, I didn't know how to lead, and then I became a site Q, and being a site Q taught me everything I needed to know about leadership. I don't know if that happens, but tell me about your experience being a site Q. What did you enjoy? What maybe could we be doing better, or any experience or learnings from that?
Yeah, I think I've talked about this with Roadhouse and Kielbasa, maybe a few others who've been site Qs, but I feel like there's like an arc of being a site Q where, and I think it has to do with maybe the environment of you taking the shovel flag over. I think for me, I felt a lot of pressure being the second one, like not the one who launched it, but the one that comes after the one who launched it, of, maybe paying a little bit too much attention to numbers, or trying to figure out like what is my identity within something that was created based off of this person who launched it. And I feel like the first 6 months was kind of a feeling it out, not really sure. And like really the last 6 months, I felt like I started to hit my stride and really embrace just being what it felt like I wanted it to be. I think just welcoming people. I think the commitment of a year of owning that site offers a lot of fear portals to go through, right? Like you got to constantly kind of put yourself out there. You got to reach out to guys. You got to show up consistently every week. Can't Fartsack. And no matter what's going on in life, whether you have a newborn or you have chaos going on in your life, like there's an expectation of leading that site and being at the helm. And I really appreciate it. I think that my reservations when Roadhouse asked me was for a lot of those reasons, but more so just like the commitment of a year and the uncertainty that comes with that. But the amount that I think the resilience that I formed from having that responsibility really allowed me to step into a lot of these other areas of my life that seem to be more in flow for me. So I want to thank Roadhouse too. Like there was a couple times that I just kind of bent his ear. I think it was last summer, probably a couple months in, and numbers were, a lot lower than they had been. We had like our core group of, 5 to 7 guys that always post there, but people were going to site launches, to VQs, kind of being pulled with the expansion. And he was like, just let it be what it's going to be. You literally can't control it. And that was the best advice he could give to me is, you're not going to do anything that's going to change that dynamic. I applaud folks who do lean into that, like what's happening at Wild Kingdom with the different themes per month. I think is awesome from Catch Up. So I think that there are ways that you can make it your own, but don't put too much pressure on yourself. Like you're going to learn a lot, and it's going to be different from each guy and the wisdom that comes with it. But doing anything for a year that consistently it's got to give you something, right?
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I mean, I went through similar stuff with the Woodshed. It's hard to remove the ego aspect, right, that comes with it. We had opened an additional site over at Brickyard. Numbers started dwindling. Like, well, what is that saying about my leadership?
Totally.
And then, to Roadhouse's credit and to what you just said, nothing, right? I mean, you just kind of let it run its course. And sure, you can do things like you were doing, reaching out to guys, getting VQ schedules, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's not about you and your leadership. It's about keeping the site alive and making sure and you're preserving it for the next person. So with that being said, let's briefly hit on successorship and what that looked like for you, kind of identifying someone and how you went about it.
Yeah. It's kind of the story I told at the Flag Pass too. I think it was the night before a workout in December, so a couple months before the pass was coming, and I had the realization, I'm like, I need to start thinking about who could potentially be on a short list of people that could take over the site. And I showed up the next day, and I think I spent 80 to 90% of the workout partnered up with or running with Kilbasa and just getting to know him better and asking questions. And I left that workout being like, it's him if he wants it. And I said it in my COT at the pass. I was like, it was always you. It was always you, man. And obviously I talked to Tater and Roadhouse a couple weeks after that about, approaching him specifically. And they were like, I think it's perfect because Roadhouse said, that's kind of the mindset I have when I asked you is who is someone that needs to post? Who is someone that needs the weekly commitment to be there? And it really did offer me that consistency. I don't know if I would have posted the one time a week that I'm posting if I didn't have that site queue. And so I kind of said that to Kobasa. I sent him a text. I said, no pressure, I want it to be you. I know that there's probably a range of emotions that you're feeling with me reaching out. whatever decision you make is totally acceptable. But give it, a couple of weeks and maybe think about it and come to the conclusion you want to. And again, you choose, you let me know. I'll definitely go a different direction, and no love lost if not. And yeah, he was bought in. He pretty much confirmed it with that text back to me, but gave him some space to kind of just consider it a little bit more. And it was always him.
Man, I love that it was always you. It was always him. That's really cool. And cool that, I think it's fun to hear different strategies for how we choose successors. There's kind of this idea of like, is a guy ready? And, it's like, well, are any of us ever ready? It's like, I know I was never ready. I think Wait Time just didn't want to say no because he knew I'd keep asking. But anyway, I did. So this is a new question that we haven't asked anybody yet, but it came up during the 5-year anniversary in a COT that Wait Time and Tater did. And so the question is, what's something that, so what did you think was important when you started F3? And what do you realize now that's maybe more important today after being in the group for a while?
What I thought was important was fitting in. What I know is important now is being what I am authentically. And that's within F3 Omaha. I think that's in life in general. The more you can be operating from, what your true authentic self is, the happier you're going to be. And I think the changeover there is like wanting to be accepted versus starting to put myself out there a little bit more, like unconventional ways to pray us out, which I felt really uncomfortable doing for a while, and trying to figure out a way to not wrap a specific faith element into it, but still have that essence, or be vulnerable in COTs, right? Like, I found that the more vulnerable I was, the more people were meeting me in that place of expression. So whatever you're wanting to say, whatever you're wanting to feel, whatever you're wanting to do, those fear portals are there to just go through them. There's no skill needed. There's no knowledge need to be gained. You going through it alone is enough to come out the other side.
Man, I really appreciate you being you. We haven't had a lot of opportunities to talk outside of this forum, but I really appreciate the way you just think about things. It's, you've got a unique perspective on things, and I've learned a lot just in this brief period of time, and I encourage other guys to continue to reach out to you. And want to thank you for taking the time to meet with us and kind of offer up your story here. Before we kind of close out here, I guess, is there anything that we should be praying for you for, words of encouragement if we see you out in the gloom, anything that's weighing on your heart that we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, I think the need for courage is something that is it's still hard, even though we practice it, right? Like, others may relate to that, but as put together as you think that someone else is, like, there's massive amounts of uncertainty that we're each going through, and every week, every day, I feel like I'm facing that for myself. So anybody that can offer space of courage for me in all the ways, I think is really helpful. I'll also say, like, I love gaining wisdom from others who have had kids, who are in the same phase, who are struggling. Like, I try to be as honest as I can about, like, the ups and downs of being a father or being a person raising kids. So I'm always open for a conversation. There's probably like a Q source space that we can create for those raising kids that could, especially fatherhood too. It offers so many different things that you have to face once you start going through it. So wish us luck, and I'll take any amount of advice or wisdom that both of you have or anybody else.
Man, I love that. I think you just gave us our next brilliant idea for Q source. Maybe we take one element of the concentrica and we focus in, I love that because it almost creates a mini shield lock around that. But no,
Yeah.
I'll be thinking about you. I don't know. My goal with kids, man, is just somehow they can't be as selfish as I am, right? When they grow up, they gotta have, shed a little bit of the selfishness that I have, and maybe it's just being aware, of yourself and where you're at. But I do want to encourage guys, if you see Slick out in the gloom, ask him about his blog. If you know his real name, you'll hear it here in a minute when we do Namerama. But you guys should check out his blog. I think more insights on several topics that we touched on here, but more in depth, and you'll get an even deeper look into this man's heart and his mind a little bit, and just how he's processing the world, which I think I'm inspired by, Slick. So just appreciate your time and you sharing your story, man. And yeah, this has been really great. I don't know about you, but I feel my mood elevator is lifted. Anything else before we do Namerama? Anything else come to mind, or stories you want to share? Or...
I think just again, thank you guys. Like this is a unique thing, and you guys have to put yourself out there often, and I really appreciate the space.
Yeah, man. All right, I'll start us off with a little Namerama. All right, Brandon Flehardy, 37, The Plague.
John Whitworth, 31, Pony Express.
Pony, nay.
This is Rob Snarskis, 37, Slick.
Slick. Thank you, brother.
The hair
Thank you,
slicked
guys.
back, looking good.